Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajacharya Astottara Sata Shri Shrimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sako Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing with the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, compiled and written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We're on the third volume, the third chapter, New Jagannath Puri. Prabhupada spent about 5 months in San Francisco. After he was invited for the big rock concert, he stayed on. And whereas he made maybe 15 devotees in New York, he already had about 25 devotees in San Francisco by this time. Because there it was both men and women joining. Whereas in New York there were very few women joining. It was mostly brahmacharis that he was training, and they were taking over his responsibilities of cooking, cleaning. They were learning how to give class. They were doing the writing and the editing of Back to Godhead. They had many responsibilities there in New York. So now Prabhupada, opening his second Radha Krishna temple in San Francisco, he was training these young boys and girls that he called boys and girls. And already 25 devotees were initiated. He would give classes in the morning and then in the evening. His evening classes were better attended than the morning classes. So we heard last week how Srila Prabhupada, there was a very uncomfortable situation with one madman boy who had come in, proclaimed himself as God, and caused quite a commotion. But Prabhupada remained completely undisturbed, and the man of his own accord stomped out of the temple, slamming the door after announcing to the audience that he was God. And Prabhupada just went on with the lecture. And the devotees were quite surprised. They were watching to see what Prabhupada would do. So after that incident, when the boy left, Prabhupada told the story of Haridas Thakur, how we have to be tolerant. And he explained how Haridas Thakur had to suffer the flogging in so many marketplaces, and the floggers, they were worried because he didn't die. The whole intention was that he die by the whipping, but it didn't happen. So he pretended to die. Then the magistrate had him thrown into the water because according to the Mohammedan religion, a respectable person is buried. But he didn't allow them to bury him. They threw him in the water, and in that way he was able to continue with his devotional life. So now Prabhupada's telling a second story about tolerance. And this is the story from the Mahabharata of Satyavan and Savitri. Savitri is one of the main women who the women in general worship because of her unwavering faithfulness to her husband. Ramba, Uma, Arundhati, so many great ladies who were worshipped and seen as worshipable because of their devotion. A devotee suffers no loss, Prabhupada explained, even if he doesn't become perfectly Krishna conscious, or even if he falls away. His next birth also will be human. So Prabhupada is speaking here from the Bhagavad-Gita, the 4th and the 6th chapters. He's explaining how even if we do not complete our Krishna consciousness in this lifetime, we're guaranteed a human lifetime, next birth, so that we can continue where we left off. And Prabhupada's telling this story from the Mahabharata as an example. There was a prince. Prabhupada began a story to illustrate his point. His name was Satyavan, but he was to die at a certain age, his horoscope said. But one girl named Savitri, she fell in love with that boy. Now she wanted to marry. Her father told her, "He'll die at a certain age. You don't marry." But she was bent. She married. Now this story is a beautiful love story in the Mahabharata, how she went on her own. She couldn't find a suitable match, very intelligent princess. She went on her own Swayamvar, traveling to different kingdoms to find a husband. And on the road, she saw Satyavan, and his father was a king who had lost his kingdom. So she decided she wanted to marry Satyavan, and she was recommended by her parents, don't marry him, he's supposed to die on his marriage day. So Prabhupada, in course of time, the boy died, say after 4 or 5 years. And the girl became widow. But she was so staunch lover that she won't let the dead body go away. And the Yamaraj, what is the English for one who takes away the body or the soul after death? So in Christian philosophy, they don't have a person like Yamaraj because they don't have demigods. So he came to take the soul away. So this chaste girl would not allow the husband's body to go away. By Prabhupada's voice and widening eyes, he appeared as Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, speaking to the widow Savitri. "It is my duty that I should take. You give it up, otherwise you'll be also punished." So he was threatening her that don't interfere because it's my responsibility to take the souls, and according to their activities, they have to either be punished or rewarded. And he warned her not to interfere with this. The girl gave up her husband, but followed behind Yamaraj. Then Prabhupada's Yamaraj, by a slight dropping of his voice, became compassionate. To Prabhupada, he's telling the story as a dialogue. "My dear girl, you go home. I give you benediction that you will have a son. Don't cry for your husband. But Savitri continued to follow Yamaraj. Yamaraj said, "Why are you following me?" Then Prabhupada Savitri spoke, not in a feminine voice, but with the reasoning and heart of Savitri. "Now you are taking my husband. How can I have a son?" Prabhupada spoke as narrator. Oh, then he was in a dilemma. He returned her husband. So similarly, there is a technique. If you take to Krishna consciousness, then your husband, or this human form of life, is guaranteed. The devotees understood the gist of the story, but they weren't perfectly clear what their lives had to do with the woman in the story. Some, however, understood. If they took to Krishna consciousness, their ill-destined lives could become auspicious. So in later lectures, Prabhupada would speak about Savitri and Satyavan. And he explains that some men, they marry a very chaste woman, and although they're debauchees and they engage in so many improper activities, they believe, as in with Savitri, because they have a very chaste wife, their wife will save them at the time of death, just as Savitri did. But it doesn't work that way. Prabhupada was, and in the Shastra, this example is given because of her unfailing chastity to her husband. But her husband also was a very great devotee. He was a prince. It wasn't that he had engaged in any sinful activities. It was just according to his horoscope, he was destined to die at a particular time. But she was able to change that by her chastity. It's not that just by having a chaste wife, you get saved automatically. So, some, however, understood if they took to Krishna consciousness, their ill-destined lives could become auspicious. Yes, Srila Prabhupada continued, a spiritual life is the most auspicious life. He looked around emphatically at the devotees seated before him on the floor. Anyone who has done something nice, auspicious thing, oh, it will never be vanquished. He will never be put into difficulty. It is such a nice thing. He ended his lecture and asked for questions. A young woman raised her hand. You say that people foolishly worship the photograph of someone who has already gone. You gave the example of George Washington or Gandhi. But can't the photo of a spiritual teacher be very helpful to teach others to love him? So this was not exactly, Prabhupada, sometimes he would have to stop the questions because when Prabhupada was trying to make a point, and then people would ask questions that had nothing to do with what Srila Prabhupada was speaking about. So the point Prabhupada was trying to make was that all of you sitting here who are listening in the lecture, all of you who have taken to Krishna consciousness, the advancement you make will never be vanquished. And you will progress from that point, even in your next lifetime. And you should attempt in this lifetime to become fully Krishna conscious. So now this girl asks a question, and Srila Prabhupada, he's going to very mercifully respond to her. Prabhupada, yes, those who are spiritually advanced, they are not different from their photo. Just like here is a statue of Krishna. He's not different from Krishna. The original person, Krishna, and this statue of Krishna are the same. Just like we are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna and the name of Krishna are non-different. Do you realize it? If we are not getting some spiritual enlightenment by chanting Hare Krishna, then do you think we are simply wasting our time? No, we're not wasting our time. We're actually getting spiritual ecstasy because there is no difference. Similarly, a spiritually perfect person and his photograph are the same, because it is in the absolute stage. Is that clear? So this is a beautiful picture of Srila Prabhupada, and standing above Prabhupada is the deity, the first murti that was established in the temple, Kartamashi. Kartamashi means the boss. He's standing like this. He's overlooking the temple now. Although Prabhupada didn't install him, he wasn't an installed deity, they weren't doing any proper worship. Even then, he uses Kartamashi as an example, as Krishna being non-different from his murti. And a pure devotee is also non-different from his photo. Now, one time Prabhupada, he went to Mexico. And in Mexico, because they were colonized by the Spaniards, most of the people became Catholic. And there's many beautiful temples, a lot of devotion in Mexico. And Prabhupada was staying in a room because wherever he went, he would go to any programs that they invited him to. And the Christians, they have murtis of Jesus Christ, of Mary with Jesus Christ, of the different saints, because they understand that worship of these so-called deities, or they're not idols, but what we can call them murtis, there you can get some spiritual impression and purification. But in the room where Prabhupada was staying was a crucifix, and that's Jesus Christ when he was nailed to a cross. And it's a very gruesome manifestation of Jesus Christ. So Prabhupada, he told the devotees to take down this crucifix, because this is when the people killed their own guru. This is the way Prabhupada saw it, because there was some infidelity amongst Jesus's disciples, and he was reported, and as a result of that, the Romans took him and crucified him, and it's a long story in Christianity. So Prabhupada, he respected Jesus Christ as a guru, and he understood the history because he had been trained in the Scottish Church's college by the Pedros, by the fathers, and he had a lot of respect for his teachers, who were all priests, because they were brahmacharis. So he understood that this is an inauspicious manifestation of Jesus Christ, although he was considered Shaktavish avatar, like that. So Prabhupada, even within our Krishna consciousness, and even outside of Krishna consciousness, those such as Jesus Christ are considered non-different from their forms and their pictures. So therefore, Prabhupada could not bear to see Jesus Christ suffering like that on the cross. So he's asking, is that clear? Govindadasi raised her hand. You said that after leaving this body, a person in Krishna consciousness goes to a higher planet? Prabhupada, no. If you make perfection of Krishna consciousness, then after leaving this body, you go directly to Krishna. But if you are not perfect, if you have simply executed a certain percentage only, then you'll get the chance of another human body. But one who has understood what is Krishna, how Krishna takes his birth, how Krishna acts, he doesn't get any more material birth. Then, where does he go? Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorjana. So we know that verse. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorjuna. So the devotees, they didn't have the Bhagavad-Gita at that time. Srila Prabhupada was still speaking the Sanskrit to the sloka, although they didn't know what the sloka was. But the point of that sloka is that one who understands the birth and the activities of Krishna at the time of giving up his body, Naiti Mameti Sojana, he doesn't have to take another birth, but he comes to me, to Krishna. So that's the point that that Prabhupada was making to Govinda Dasi, that only if you do not complete your Krishna consciousness, understand Krishna's birth, understand Krishna's activities, understand that he's the Supreme Lord and we're his eternal servants, then you might have to take birth as a human being. It could be on a higher planet. It could be again on the earthly planet. We don't know. There's always a chance. When Jayananda, who was the only devotee that Srila Prabhupada considered saintly at the time of his death, therefore we honor his disappearance every year. And Prabhupada wrote Jayananda a letter after he left. And he explained to Jayananda that if by chance you had some material desires, then certainly you would have gone to the heavenly planets and enjoyed there for thousands of years, and then proceeded on to your Krishna conscious, your real position. But I am certain that you have attained Krishna consciousness because of all the service that he did for Srila Prabhupada. He was the first devotee who gave a considerable donation by which Prabhupada was able to print his books. He was the first devotee who took the Rath Yatra to the highest limits. 3 huge carts, just like at Jagannath Puri, rolling down through this Golden Gate Parkway, and then having Rath Yatra all over America. In New York City, down 5th Avenue, Jayananda made those carts. In Los Angeles, he made the carts. He was like Mr. Rath Yatra. So he did so much to assist Prabhupada. And even at the end of his life, he had leukemia. Leukemia is cancer of the blood. He was in intense pain. He had lumps all over his body and big, horrible looking discolorations. But he didn't let anybody know. This was at the time of the New York Rath Yatra. And finally, when the Rath Yatra was over, he collapsed. And one devotee, Keshav Bharati, saw him in great pain and saw all of the lumps on his body. And he made Jayananda promise that as soon as the Rath Yatra is over, you take care of yourself. And then it was just a downhill path where he finally, if you see the pictures, he was in a wheelchair. He was in Los Angeles. Because even in that condition, bedridden, he was teaching the devotees how to make the carts for the Los Angeles Rath Yatra. So up to the last moment of his life, he was meditating on how to please Srila Prabhupada by making the Rath Yatras and by spreading Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada assured him that I am certain you have gone back to Godhead. And if not, if for some reason you had some material desire, then you would have enjoyed for many thousands of years on the heavenly planets and then gone back to Godhead. So this is gradually what Prabhupada's teaching the devotees. Therefore, we should be very serious. Why should we wait for another birth? Either in very pious family, or rich family, or in other planet. This human body can give you the highest perfection. But we have to be very serious and try for that perfection. But we are not serious. We are not very serious. Actually, human civilization means that people should be very serious to have perfection of this human body. That is perfect human civilization. That is missing at the present moment. So Srila Prabhupada in his book, this is one of the first covers of Easy Journey to Other Planets, where the devotee, you see in his hand, what does he have? He has his japamala. And with that japamala, this japamala is going to his, it's like an umbilical cord. By chanting, you get to get your spiritual birth in the spiritual world with Radha and Krishna. And Prabhupada, he explained, I think in the lecture that we heard this morning by Srila Prabhupada also, that there's no way that you can reach the higher planets by mechanical or artificial means. There is a way to get there that's explained in the Vedics, the Vedic Shastras, how to reach the heavenly planets, but not the way the astronauts and the scientists are trying to get there now. It's not possible. And that's why when they so-called reach the moon, although Prabhupada insists that they never reached the moon, and it's coming to light now that actually it was Arizona that they actually went to, all they saw was dust, because there's no way that you can enter in the higher planets unless you have proper qualifications. Just like when you want to go to America, Prabhupada explains, you have to have a passport, you have to have a visa, you have to have a bank account, so many qualifications just to go from one country in this planet to another. What to speak of going to the heavenly planets? So many pious activities. And over and above that, what to speak of attaining the spiritual planets of Goloka Vrindavan, which is the highest of all the planets. This material sphere is only 1/4 of the creation. It's like a dark cloud. And all the rest is these self-illuminated Vaikuntha planets. So in order to reach those Vaikuntha planets, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yo Veti Tattvataha. One has to understand the birth and activities of Krishna, and with our umbilical cord of our japamala, we can chant our way back to Godhead. So this is, every time they printed the Easy Journey to Other Planets, they would make some new, interesting cover. This is another cover. We have Narada Muni. Narada Muni, he's the eternal spaceman. He can go wherever he likes. He can go to Dwarka. He spends a lot of time in Dwarka because he has that relationship with Krishna in Aishvarya Ras. So, but here we have the material planets and how the pure devotees such as Narada Muni, he can attain the Vaikuntha Lokas and the spiritual planet of Goloka Vrindavan. Narada Muni used to come and speak to Krishna when he was living here in Vrindavan, in Gokula. So he could go anywhere because he's always chanting Narada Muni Bhajaya Vina Radhika Ramana Namine. He's always chanting the holy names of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada sat in silence for several minutes, not moving. No one in the audience made a sound. Finally, he reached over for his kartals and began loudly ringing them together and singing, Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya. And the devotees joined him. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya. So this is another mantra that Srila Prabhupada would sometimes sing in kirtans. It was Prabhupada's desire to see his disciples raise their Krishna consciousness to 100% in their present lifetime. They could do it too, because the chanting was absolutely potent. If there was something they didn't understand, he would explain it. Govinda Dasi hadn't understood. She had thought that a devotee was meant to go to a higher planet, but now she understood. Excuse me. And he had told them to become more serious. He knew they sometimes went to the donut shop and even smoked cigarettes after kirtans. Prabhupada, he had a window because next to the temple, the next building, Prabhupada was staying on the 3rd floor, and he could see from his window what the devotees were doing. When he would leave the temple, he would look out of his window. Many times, wherever Prabhupada was, he would look out of his window. In Bombay, he would look out of his window and watch us. Here in Vrindavan, he would look out of his window and watch to see who was late for Mangal Artik. Call us in if we were late. Why were you late? So Prabhupada, he understood that you couldn't fool Srila Prabhupada. He was a pure devotee. He's the external manifestation of Super Soul. Prabhupada knew the devotees were still eating donuts, and some of them were still even smoking cigarettes. But he let them know that he really wanted them to be completely serious. Unless they were completely serious, they might have to go to a higher planet within the material universe. And what good was that? To rise to a human birth took many lifetimes. Human life was meant for perfection, so they should be serious. But, he had said, we are not serious. So this is what happens even on this planet. Some parts of this planet are just like the hellish regions. Eating unspeakable things. They eat cockroaches and grasshoppers and embryos. Horrible things. Hellish life. Cannibals, like that. And some places on this planet are just like heavenly planets. If you go to Switzerland, such a clean, beautiful Alp mountains, and some people think that America is going to be like heaven until they get there. And then they decide to come back to India. That's what's happening now. There's a saying, the grass is always greener on the other side. So wherever we are, we think that we'll go someplace else and that'll be nicer. And Prabhupada's explaining there's no purpose to go to the heavenly planets. You go to the heavenly planets, you use up your pious credits, and then you fall down again as seeds in the rain, grass seeds. And you have to start the whole evolutionary process all over again on this earthly planet. The demigods are waiting in line to take birth on earth, because here, this is the place where we can elevate ourselves and go back to Godhead. The heavenly planets, they're enjoying so much that they forget about spiritual life. The hellish planets, they're suffering so much that they're just thinking how to get out of their suffering. But here, on the middle planets, like Earth, there's enjoyment and there's suffering. There's enough suffering that we want to get out of the material world. And there's enough enjoyment that we can engage in pious activities so that we can eventually come to the platform of pure goodness. So Earth is the best place for going back to Godhead. But we're not serious. After the kirtan, Srila Prabhupada left the storefront and returned to his apartment. So we have to remember how all these stories and how this whole conversation started because of the madman who proclaimed himself to be God. Hayagriva, turning to Haridas, Haridas was the artist who gave Prabhupada his loft apartment, went to San Francisco. Now he was the temple president here in San Francisco. So Hayagriva, turning to Haridas, asked why no one had thrown the crazy boy out. In New York, Hayagriva said Brahmananda would have removed him at the first outburst. So New York was quite different from San Francisco, because San Francisco, free love, free sex, free everything. And you had to be very careful with all these hippies. New York, things are, Brahmananda, you did something wrong, you just pick you up and throw you out of the temple, that's all. You have to be careful with the hippies here, Haridas explained. Tactful is the word. In this neighborhood, if someone walks around high on LSD, people automatically assume that he is due all the respect of God and should be tolerated. They come in and jump up and down and scream, but we can't lay a hand on them because they are LSD saints. If we had touched that boy this morning, the whole neighborhood would be down on us. So there's a whole different form of etiquette amongst the hippies because they were taking this LSD intoxicant to get mystical experiences. And therefore anyone who could tolerate LSD, because sometimes it wasn't always pleasant to be on LSD, sometimes you had terrible experiences because that's what the way intoxication is. It's slow suicide, intoxication. So the people were very tolerant, and actually they looked up to these LSD saints. So therefore the devotees couldn't throw them out of the temple like that. But Prabhupada, they saw how he dealt with the situation. He completely tolerated it, went on with his lectures, and the boy himself extricated himself out of the temple. So next to the temple lived the diggers. The diggers next door are pretty noisy, but they unplug their jukebox during lectures. And they've been very friendly, giving us clothing and helping us decorate the temple. Sometimes the Hell's Angels go over there and raise a lot of noise. And sometimes they even come in here. If they do, best to humor them. They are always trouble. So who are the Hell's Angels? We heard about them before because even they attended Prabhupada's programs sometimes. Yes, they did. Hell's Angels are a international motorcycle group all over the world. They ride these huge, 3 times as big as Royal Enfields, called Harley Davidsons. Now they've come to India also. And they have groups, and they engage in a lot of intoxication, a lot of illicit sex, but they have rules, very strict rules actually. So, and in order to become a member, you have to go through an initiation ceremony, everything like that. So these Hell's Angels would sometimes cause trouble in the neighborhood. Sometimes they would even come into the temple, and the devotees would just tolerate them and give them prasadam. Now the diggers, I looked up what the diggers are. This is not part of the Lilamrita, it's just so that we can know who the diggers are. The San Francisco Diggers became one of the legendary groups in the Haight-Ashbury during the years 1966 to 1968, and that's exactly when Prabhupada was there, 1967. Their most famous activities revolved around free food. That's exactly what the devotees were doing. They provided free food service in the panhandle of Golden Gate Park. So there are different parts. Golden Gate Park is gigantic. And one part of it where the hippies hung out was called the Panhandle. Every day at 4 o'clock, feeding about 100 people with a stew from donated meat and vegetables. So they were not vegetarian, but they were sympathetic, and therefore they gave out free food. And the free store, where everything was free for taking. So they had a big store, and people would donate clothes, donate furniture, whatever they had that they didn't need. And other people would come in and take whatever they needed. And that way they gave free food. And as the devotee said here, as Haridas said here, The diggers, they used to give clothing to the devotees. They used to give decorations for the temple. So they even helped their neighbors, the devotees. The diggers also opened a free medical clinic. The free food and medical clinics were immediate responses to conditions caused by the enormous influx of young people during the heyday of the hippie scene. Conditions that the San Francisco government was ignoring. So we heard about when the police brought that crazed young boy who was screaming, "Krishna help me, Krishna save me." So the police brought the boy to the temple and thought, maybe you can help him, we can't help him. So the police were not, they saw all these influx of thousands and thousands of hippies, 40,000 hippies in one summer, the summer of love, like that. But they were not doing welfare activities because they were breaking the law. They were taking intoxications. They were panhandling. That means they were begging on the streets because many of them didn't have money, like that. So the police were not so favorable to the hippies. So the diggers, they were considered anarchists. They were not part of the government. And they were filling in for the government what they felt the government should be doing. Free medical clinic, free food, free clothes, like that. These are the Hells Angels. That very morning, some Hells Angels started a fight in the digger's store. This is the Lilamrita again. The devotees could hear thuds and screams through the walls as a big black man beat up 3 Hells Angels. The brawl ended only after a police car and an ambulance arrived. Afterwards, about a dozen people drifted into the temple talking about the brawl. The brawl means a fight, a fist fight. Harsharani put out extra plates for the guests. So whatever was going on in the neighborhood, the devotees went on with their activities. They chanted Hare Krishna. The door was always open for these people, even the Hells Angels and the diggers. And when they walked in the temple, they were always offered prasadam. Prabhupada, at one point, he sent a circular out to all the temples in ISKCON. And he said that there should always be prasadam for whoever comes. Whoever comes to the temple should get prasadam. We can never say, it's finished, there's not enough, insufficient. Always there has to be prasadam. And if there's leftover the prasadam, afterwards, if you make enough and there's too much, then the devotees can take that prasadam. So that's why here at our temple, the very first thing Prabhupada did was he made a water trough for the cows at the front of the temple. And then after that, he had us distribute prasadam at the front of the temple, kitri prasadam, so that anyone who came to the temple, and to this day it's going on, 50 years now, anyone who comes to the temple will get prasadam. So even 1967, Harsharani put out extra plates for the guests. Harsharani was one of the female devotees. One day in March, so now we're in March 1967, Prabhupada had come there in January, February, March. He'd been there now 3 months. 18-year-old Wayne Gunderson was walking down the street when a piece of paper blowing along the sidewalk caught on his foot. He tried to kick it off without breaking his stride, but it hung on. Then he stopped and tried to kick it off. He couldn't. He reached down and picked it off and found that it was a flyer. Stay high forever. Advertising lectures by Swami Bhaktivedanta at 518 Frederick Street. Like so many others, Wayne, a mild-mannered young man who worked for the post office, had come to Haight-Ashbury to take part in the revolution, the hippie revolution. Love, peace. He attended rock concerts and be-ins, browsed through the books and posters in the psychedelic shops, shared an apartment with his girlfriend and another couple, and took drugs. But he was quiet, polite, and solitary. He didn't dress like a hippie, but wore clean, conservative, casual clothes and a whimsical, odd-looking sports cap. So here is a picture of when Wayne became initiated. Prabhupada named him, we'll hear about it, named him Upendra Das. And Upendra went on to become one of Srila Prabhupada's dearmost personal servants, who traveled all around the world with Srila Prabhupada. He also opened up temples in Australia, in Fiji. He married, he had two beautiful children, Somya and Shantaya. Prabhupada named them. Somya was a little boy who was here. They lived here for some time, the family. And Upendra served Prabhupada, traveled with him everywhere. So this is how Upendra, Wayne, joined Krishna consciousness, by the piece of paper stuck on his foot. The flyer about the Swami seemed a timely coincidence, because Wayne had been planning to go to India to find a guru. He decided to go see Swami Bhaktivedanta on Frederick Street. Wayne was surprised to find only a storefront. He was startled by the picture of the Swami in the window. No smiling, bearded yogi, but a shaven-headed Swami with a stern look. Wayne went in. It was a typical Haight-Ashbury scene with hippies sitting around. But there were also a few people with big red beads strung like garlands around their necks, because in those days the devotees, they went to the hobby shop and they bought these red beads and strung the beads themselves, because we didn't have Tulsi beads in those days. Everyone had the red beads. And up front he saw the Swami. Wayne was impressed as Prabhupada began chanting Hare Krishna, and he found the lecture firm and authoritative. The Swami stressed, "We are not these bodies." And when he spoke of Krishna, he described Krishna so personally that it was like being introduced to Krishna. After a few meetings, Wayne got up the nerve to ask a question. So he went once, and then he kept going to hear Prabhupada's lectures. Now finally he was going to ask his first question. Can one practice Hatha Yoga at the same time as Krishna consciousness? Prabhupada's reply, "Oh, why do you want to spend so much time with that body?" Prabhupada replied, and Wayne felt Prabhupada's eyes look deep within him. "You are not that body." He said it so strongly that Wayne, who was easily hurt, felt like shrinking into the floor. So even in the Bhagavad-Gita, the Hatha Yoga system is described. The yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, all of that. That's all Hatha Yoga. Because in the yoga system, first you have to control your body. And then after controlling your body, you can control your mind. First the senses have to be controlled, then the mind has to be controlled. And when the body and senses are under the control, then you can come to the platform of realizing that this body is just a machine, that the soul is sitting within. So the purpose of Hatha Yoga is to control the body. Therefore, Prabhupada says, why do you want to spend so much time with that body? No, you go to the, Prabhupada would explain it like an elevator. You can walk up, there's 120 floors in the Empire State Building. You can walk up 120 floors, or you can take the express elevator right to the top. So why do you want to waste your time with Hatha Yoga when immediately you can take to Bhakti Yoga? This body is not as important as the soul, Srila Prabhupada explained. So we shouldn't spend so much time with the body, exaggerating its needs. Then he smiled at Wayne. Besides, all yogas culminate in Krishna consciousness. And Wayne felt that smile lift him completely out of his diminished and crushed condition. So first comes hearing. Ado Guru Vashraya. First we have to associate with the pure devotees. And by that association we get a little faith, a little shraddha. And then from that shraddha, then comes all the different steps. We want to give up our bad activities. We want to accept the activities that the devotees are engaging in. And gradually we get attachment, a taste for Krishna consciousness. Finally, our love starts to develop. So we're stepping through now with Wayne, how first he got the invitation, although he wasn't looking for it. He realized that this is actually what he was looking for because he wanted a guru. Instead of traveling all the way to India, he went to Frederick Street. He listened to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada set him straight with the first question and answer. Don't waste your time on Hatha Yoga. You go to the top. And by Prabhupada's very, very gently dealing with him, first striking him, he felt completely crushed. And then by his smile and looking at him in a very compassionate way, he felt close to Srila Prabhupada that way. Several weeks later, Wayne asked about initiation. When the devotees told him he should go up and see the Swami, Wayne went home and rehearsed his lines first. Anticipating what Prabhupada would say, Wayne prepared his own responses and contrived the whole conversation. Then nervously, he approached Prabhupada's door. But before he could even knock, the door opened, and there was Prabhupada looking at him. Not sternly, as in his picture, but kindly, as if expecting him. Yes, Prabhupada said, come in. The incident completely shattered Wayne's planned approach. He concluded that Swamiji could read minds. So, trying to clear his mind of bad thoughts, he entered Prabhupada's apartment. Prabhupada sat in his rocking chair, and Wayne, who usually sat on the floor, sat in the only other chair in the room. Wayne immediately felt uncomfortable as she realized that it would be more proper to sit at Prabhupada's feet. But feeling too weak-hearted to alter the situation, he kept his seat, nervously fingering his sports cap. Swamiji, he began, I would like to be your disciple. Prabhupada immediately agreed. He asked whether Wayne could follow the 4 principles, and Wayne, although not even sure what the 4 principles were, said he could. This is Upendra cooking with Prabhupada. Upendra was a very good cook. Sometimes when I couldn't cook, Prabhupada would send Upendra to step in because the servants, as we've heard so many times from Shruti Kirti, they had to be able to do everything for Srila Prabhupada. Massage, cook, get everything ready for his morning walks, get everything ready for everything. They had to learn everything as personal servants. So Upendra was such a good personal servant for Srila Prabhupada that Prabhupada kept him manual as he traveled all around the world. So this is Prabhupada. This is a part of Prabhupada's cooker that Upendra is holding in his hands, and Prabhupada's teaching him something there at the stove. Prabhupada then asked him what principle was the most difficult for him to follow. Well, he said, I have difficulty with meat eating. A lie. He was a vegetarian. But he was too shy to say that his real problem was uncontrolled sexual desire. Prabhupada laughed. Oh, that's no problem. We will give you prasadam. You can be initiated next week. So when Prabhupada left the planet, Upendra, he went back to San Francisco. He had we can say a fall down, but then he became very ill. So he came back to the association of the devotees. The devotees all loved him because we all got to serve with him wherever Prabhupada was traveling. So Upendra at one point, we'll read in the later volumes, he went to Australia to help open up the temples there. So he made a lot of devotees in Australia. So the devotees in Australia invited him, you come, we'll take care of you. Now that he was dying, in other words. So they all took care of him up until his last breath. So this is an example of, even if one has a fall down, because of their Krishna consciousness and the love of the devotees, at the time of death, he was in the association of devotees, they were all chanting Hare Krishna, and we can be assured that he's gone to serve Prabhupada again. Wayne then asked if he would be able to go to India. He felt the Swami would be pleased to hear that his new follower wanted to go to his country. But Prabhupada seemed displeased. India? Why India? Wayne thought, the real reason he wanted to go to India was to find a guru. Well, he said, to learn Sanskrit. I will teach you Sanskrit, Prabhupada replied. So there was no need to go to India. And he would be initiated by a genuine guru next week, right here in San Francisco. So we can see here, this is Prabhupada's famous cooker. This is the actual cooker. The cooker that we have in Prabhupada's house is a replica, because you'll see here there's a rounded top here. And this was made, I believe Srudakirti got it made, someone here in India got it made. They took the top off and they made a small karai. So that because, you see in the bottom we would put the dal, here we put the dal, and the steaming hot water would come up through holes, steam holes, and here we would have all on top of each other different vegetables to cook. And then on the top we would have a katori of rice closed. A closed katori of rice with one part rice and 2 1/4 parts water in a closed katori. And around the katori we will put potatoes. And the steam in 45 minutes would cook everything perfectly. The rice would come out, every single grain perfectly cooked. All the vegetables would be perfectly cooked. And then you would separate the vegetables, and in the karai, you would turn it upside down, put it on the stove, and make about 4 or 5 different vegetables that way by making the chaunts, making some vegetables dry. There always had to be Karila, so that Prabhupada, he could balance his sugar, because he loved to take sweets. So we would have Karila, we would make shukta, we would make a potato sabji, because Prabhupada loved to have potato sabjis. All different vegetables, all cooked at one time in 45 minutes. And then it would take about 10 minutes to make all the chaunces, to set up the plate, run in the plate, and then immediately start making the chapatis for Prabhupada. Run in 1 chapati every minute for Srila Prabhupada. So here, Prabhupada is teaching Upendra how to cook with his cooker. Some devotees helped Wayne prepare for his initiation ceremony. Hayagriva lent Wayne his dhoti, a piece of yellow cloth much too large for Wayne. Devotees set up a sacrificial arena in the storefront. A bed of earth, firewood, colored dyes, flowers. During the ceremony, Wayne was nervous. When Prabhupada chanted the mantras, Wayne could not hear them exactly, so he just mimicked as best he could. And when Prabhupada began the fire sacrifice, Wayne felt a little frightened because the initiation seemed such a serious commitment. He watched Prabhupada gravely building the fire and saying the mantras. When Prabhupada initiated Wayne with his new name, Upendra, Wayne didn't hear it clearly and began to worry. Then the ceremony ended, and Prabhupada stood up and abruptly left the storefront. So Srila Prabhupada, at that time, you'll see he was just initiating one person. So he would chant on the japa beads, one full mala. After chanting those japa beads, he would hand the japa beads to the devotee and give him his spiritual name. During the later years, Prabhupada, he would chant on the beads, but not right at the sacrifice. He would chant beforehand, and sometimes he would have his disciples chant on the beads for him. If he was initiating 50 devotees, that's a lot of chanting. So he would have the devotees help him. Okay. We've gone over time now, so I'll stop here, and we'll hear more about Prabhupada's pastimes next week. Hare Krishna. Jai.